Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be reviewing Going Infinite by Michael Lewis. This is a story that is detailing the rise and fall of Sam Bankman-Fried, who was a CEO, a rather young CEO, of a crypto exchange company and an investment company, and he went to prison for fraud, specifically taking the money from the people who had their money in the crypto exchange where their money was supposed to stay, and instead parking it inside of his research, or inside of Alameda Research, which was his investing company. And for this, he was convicted of fraud for some 20 something years. But the story is maybe a little bit more interesting and or sympathetic to Sam Bankman-Fried in its kind of uncovering. And towards the end of the book, Michael Lewis discusses why he did it in this way, where he is portraying Sam Bankman-Fried as a protagonist, as maybe not a hero, but the main character, with whom we are supposed to have some degree of empathy for, because he thinks that it sort of correctly captures in a performative way the way in which Sam Bankman-Fried was able to get so many people to trust him in situations where maybe they shouldn't have. And also, one of the maybe underlying themes of the book is trust, and one of the things that is, there's kind of like a lot of psychological strangeness to Sam Bankman-Fried, but one of them was he was very trusting, like he wouldn't lock his doors, he would be the easiest person in the world to kidnap or rob or trick or this type of thing. And to some degree, it's this sort of carefree carelessness, let's say, or lack of ability to appreciate risk. This is another kind of theme that is responsible for this defraudment, because as stuff kind of gets uncovered, it is less clear that there really wasn't any money to pay back the people from FTX. It was just in the wrong place. And this being in the wrong place is more maybe a product of carelessness, and carelessness in two senses, just like the absent-minded carelessness and the carelessness of I don't have feelings or care about what's going on with other people, which kind of brings us to, let's talk through the book a little bit. But the beginning of the book, he kind of talks about Sam Bankman-Fried's early life. The book is relatively chronological, and he sets things up where he's talking about some of the idiosyncrasies of Sam Bankman-Fried. I think he does it in a pretty good way, generally, talking through kind of the psychology of the guy, where he is, it seems to be on the spectrum. Michael Lewis does not directly opine as to what he may or may not be diagnosed with it, but he seems to be on the spectrum in terms of being autistic in some regard, and it is also speculated that he has a particular psychological condition which makes it impossible for him to experience emotions himself. This is partially derived through extensive readings of his journals, where he talks about not experiencing emotion whatsoever. And if you don't experience emotion, and this kind of thematically comes up later, it is difficult to empathize with other people, right? Because that is exactly what empathy is. It is imagining what the experienced emotion is for another person, much in the same way you might be imagining that loud car outside, but that actually doesn't really exist. And so it continues on talking about his time spent at an investment firm. But before that, there's actually kind of this critical foundational thing for understanding Sam Bankman-Fried, which is his interest in utilitarianism. There's a famous thought experiment, I think it's by John Rawls, but I'm not 100% sure. But the idea is that you're walking through a park and there's a drowning child. You have $200 shoes on. Do you save the child and ruin the shoes? And most people say yes. And the purpose of the thought experiment is to set up the follow-up question. Well, why don't you donate money to save lives in Africa, let's say, because you could in a very similar way save lives. You could actually probably save more lives with $200 than you could just a single life. And the idea is that resources should be distributed for the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and there is a kind of Sam Bankman-Fried buys in. Both of his parents are professors at a university. I forget the university, but he guides his life through kind of the tenets of utilitarianism as he understands it, which in terms of like thinking forward, is a very detached way of looking at things. It's a very emotionless way of looking at things. That you process stuff in terms of utility and utils and probability. And another underlying theme of the book, I think I've mentioned this already, is just risk. And that Sam Bankman-Fried is way too willing to take risk if he thinks that the upside, there's potential upside for it. I think there's a quote somewhere in the book where he says that he is willing to flip a coin on the destruction of the earth. For example, if the upside was more than 50%, like if it's over a 50-50 coin flip, it's a 51-49, then you should just flip the coin. And okay, he's got this utilitarianism bent, and then he's also got this approach where he's looking at things in terms of mathematics in a very detached and emotionless way, and he may not experience emotions himself. And then this continues on into him talking about into Michael Lewis talking about how he worked at an investment firm, was successful, and then he notices that there is a lot of kind of free money, let's say, in crypto. The people who are trading crypto aren't very good at doing it, but it is seen as relatively high risk, so the big investment firms, like the one he works at, don't want to touch it. And so he branches off his own investment company with the help of kind of the group around him of this contemporary utilitarian group whose mission is they've decided to not try and do stuff directly that helps people, like become a doctor, become a firefighter, save lives, save kittens and trees, but instead what they are going to do is just make as much money as possible and then throw the money at the charitable causes. And this is the greatest way to produce the greatest amount of good. So this is what Sam Bankman-Fried is setting out to do. And so he starts making money with crypto, and he starts becoming a very big player in FTX because the players that are playing are not competent in the same way as he is. He is not one of kind of the original crypto people who buys into this idea of a decentralized form of currency. None of that is interesting to him. It's just seen as the softest spot for making money. From here, he eventually makes his own crypto exchange, FTX. And then this is where kind of we approach the unraveling, which is maybe the back third of the book. And so, spoilers, although Sam Bankman-Fried's already gone for prison for fraud, he is able to get a lot of people to trust him and park money in his stuff. And part of this is perhaps due to his idiosyncrasies, messy hair, cargo shorts, and he is just kind of talking about this utilitarian thing, and then talking about FTX and crypto and all this stuff, and okay, it plays well, and he gets a ton of money, and a lot of people park it on the exchange. And what he does is he muddies the water in terms of where the money is. And the money that is supposed to stay in FTX, that is backing the deposits of people who had put money in it, this is instead staying in Alameda Research, which is his investment company that he had made. And this is, of course, fraud. And eventually, when there is kind of a bit of a collapse of the crypto market, there's a run on FTX. People try and pull out their money, and FTX is insolvent. Now, the kind of sort of surface layer interpretation of this is that, okay, he defrauded them, he stole money from them, and he wasn't able to pay it back. But Alameda Research, when you look at it in a more kind of detailed way, would have had enough, they had enough assets to cover the deposits, but it wasn't liquid. And so there's a run, they can't give people their money, everything blows up, and he eventually goes to prison. But some of the interesting kind of ways I think Michael Lewis approaches this is portraying it in a bit of a more ambiguous way, whether or not, okay, he intentionally defrauded people because he's not really capable of empathy and he doesn't care, and he has this grandiose sort of mission of the greatest good for the greatest number of people, but he doesn't actually care about people in his immediate vicinity whatsoever because he lacks empathy. It's just about the mission. And so maybe it's that, and then maybe it's something a little bit more like just complete carelessness with regards to risk, as well as just not really kind of being there at all for the sort of paying attention to the little factors. There's basically there's like not an org chart, for example, for the entire company. And so knowing who reports to who is just an impossible task. And there's this large-scale carelessness in a lot of different kind of sections of things. Like he invests money that in a little bit of a frivolous way. He doesn't protect his own like body, even though he like there's no security for anything, this type of thing. And this might stem from his just complete inability to evaluate risk or to really care about risk and stuff like this. And this is another major theme. During this entire blow-up, though, Michael Lewis has like a front row seat because he was already doing a piece on Sam Bankman-Fried while this was going on that had nothing to do with the blow-up because this wasn't anticipated. So he is in a front row seat for a lot of it. He gets to interview people as it's happening. And so it is pretty interesting towards the tail end. And it is entertaining. But I don't think that there's a larger kind of big picture idea you get from this. So to jump into the ratings, for utility I gave it a 1.5. Overall, I was a little bit disappointed with the book. I think that a lot of Michael Lewis's other books have been well written and entertaining, and also incorporated bigger picture ideas from people who had really good ideas or that have explained kind of new paradigm shifts or new things that you could kind of hang your conceptual coat on and be like, wow, this is interesting, how could I apply this here? I think that that's just generally not present here with Going Infinite. There's certainly some utility in some spots and maybe a little bit of novelty, but a lot of it is just having an appreciation for risk. Instead, it's really just kind of a piece on Sam Bankman-Fried, not really a piece on something else. And unpacking his psychology is maybe a little bit of an interesting experience or experiment, or at least I thought it was. For entertainment, I gave it a 7. I thought it was entertaining. For style, I gave it a 7.5. For readability, a 7.5. I think these are about the same numbers I gave Moneyball, which is one of Michael Lewis's other books, for these categories. But for interest, I gave it a 6. I just don't think I think it was interesting to unpack Sam Bankman-Fried's psychology, but I didn't think it was tremendously interesting, which gives an overall score of a 5.25, which is, for me, relatively low. I think that probably an above-average book. Maybe it's a little bit lower than it deserves. Generally speaking, kind of shooting for a rating system where the average is a 5, and most books will fall in the 4 to 6 range, and so there's a lot of books I maybe don't pick up, don't finish, that I would be below 5s, something like this. And so this was kind of on the upper end or the lower end of books that I finished and enjoyed, but really overall it didn't have a bigger picture type of thing. And so I think if I'm going to read a book for pure entertainment, I would maybe want to read a storybook instead. That's what I like to call them to all my lit friends. We don't call it literature or novels, we call them storybooks. But also, shout out to the loud car outside, busy day. But also, I think that there are other authors who do the interesting book, interesting take thing a little bit better, like Malcolm Gladwell, where Michael Lewis, I thought, was really kind of unpacking deeper ideas in some of his other books, and I was just a little bit disappointed with this one. I suppose Malcolm Gladwell and Michael Lewis are kind of in a similar vein, but I think Michael Lewis is better at painting a picture, and I think Malcolm Gladwell is maybe a little bit frivolous with the way that he portrays information, but he's generally really entertaining. So, or it's very, very interesting. I just think he takes some creative liberties, perhaps with the best way of kind of framing information. But he's also an author by profession, as is Michael Lewis, and so the book is well written, but it just wouldn't be one that I would recommend that highly. I think that you specifically would need an interest in Sam Bankman-Fried for me to kind of pull this out of my hat and recommend it to anyone, especially when compared to the other books of Michael Lewis's that I've read. And so I'll probably read The Big Short sometime soon, but was a little bit bummed out by this one. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and other than that, have a good one. Bye-bye now.